So the man who basically invented modern rule-breaking advertising.
Oh, you mean the guy who got all of America to, like, embrace the underdog?
Exactly, the think small guy. Well, he was actually so personally terrified of risk that he wore the exact same pattern of tie and ate at the exact same restaurant literally every single day.
Which is just such a wild paradox.
Right. So today we're doing a deep dive into how a man who meticulously hid his own humanity somehow managed to completely weaponize ours.
And we're pulling all our insights today from this really revealing book called Nobody's Perfect, Bill Bernbach and the Golden Age of Advertising.
By Doris Willens, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
She was actually the head of public relations for years at his agency, Doyle Dane Bernbach, or DDB, as most people call it.
Which means she had this incredible front row seat to all of it.
Oh, absolutely. She saw this sheer creative genius, but also the intense psychological paradoxes of the agency that kind of changed the entire fabric of American culture.
Yeah, and our mission for this deep dive is to shortcut your journey to understanding exactly how Bill Bernbach pulled this off.
Because it wasn't just a minor shift.
No, not at all. We are going to explore how his agency completely dismantled the aggressive, kind of awful landscape of 1950s advertising.
Right.
We'll get into the profound contradictions of his highly controlled personal life and how his specific principles of persuasion are, honestly, they're still actively manipulating our instincts today.
Which is slightly terrifying, but fascinating.
Totally. But to really appreciate the revolution, you have to picture what the industry looked like before he came along.
It was a very different world.
I mean, imagine you're sitting in your living room just trying to relax, and suddenly the television or the magazine you're holding is just screaming at you.
Just massive block text everywhere.
Yeah, like amazing, incredible, the most fabulous discovery ever made.
It was exhausting.
It's like a bad, loud infomercial that fundamentally assumes you, the viewer, are just incredibly stupid.
Right, it was just this heavy-handed repetition. Like they were literally beating you over the head with adjectives until you surrendered and bought their soap.
Exactly. So that was the baseline, right?
Yeah, that aggressive, shouting infomercial vibe was basically the entire advertising industry in the mid-20th century.
Wow.
I mean, if we look at 1949, which is the year DDB opened its doors, the undisputed king of Madison Avenue was J. Walter Thompson.
And they were massive, right?
Oh, huge. They were handling something like $130 million in client billings.
Which, just for context, is the industry term for the total amount of money clients spend on placing ads through the agency.
Right, exactly. And they dominated the landscape using those annoying jingles, heavy-handed repetition, and they had client lists full of these massive automotive and corporate packaged goods giants.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have DDB.
Yeah, starting up with just $500,000 in billings.
A literal drop in the bucket.
Barely a blip on the radar. The establishment agencies actually dismissively referred to them as having, quote, Seventh Avenue clients.
Ah, right, because they were working primarily with local Jewish retail and food brands.
Exactly. We're talking about Orbach's Apparel, Hess Department Stores, Levy's Rye Bread.
So the massive agencies just snickered at them.
Totally. They assumed DDB would just stay in their localized lane forever.
But they severely underestimated the structural revolution Bernbach was about to introduce, didn't they?
Oh, completely. Because we aren't just talking about DDB writing clever catchphrases. Bernbach fundamentally changed the actual workflow of how an advertisement was made.
He fixed a broken system.
He really did. Like in the old system, a copywriter would sit alone in a room, write all the text for an ad, and then, I mean, literally slip a piece of paper with those words under an art director's door.
Wait, seriously, under the door?
Yeah. And then the art director would draw a picture to go with it without ever actually speaking to the writer.
That is wild to consider. So the visual was just treated as a complete afterthought.
100%.
That's the equivalent of a movie director refusing to speak to the cinematographer until the film is already shot and sitting in the editing room.
That's a great analogy. You're guaranteeing a disjointed final product.
Right. So what did that actually look like on the page?
Well, the result of that assembly line was just disconnected fluff. You'd see a massive headline screaming, "The finest quality," and beneath it, an illustration of, like, a housewife sensuously stroking her kitchen floor.
In a state of bizarre, deep-down satisfaction.
Exactly. The words in the pictures had absolutely nothing to do with each other organically.
So Bernbach comes in and destroys that assembly line.
He blew it up. He introduced what became known as the Bernbach Way, which forced the copywriter and the art director into a room together right from the very start.
So he'd take a brilliant copywriter like Phyllis Robinson.
Yes, and pair her with a legendary art director like Bob Gage, and he'd make them collaborate from a completely blank page.
And the rule was that the words and pictures had to interlock.
Right. They had to rely on each other to create what Bernbach saw as a third bigger thing.
A third bigger thing. I love that. And you can see that operating perfectly in one of their very first ads in 1949 for Orbach's department store.
With the trade-in ad.
Yes. The headline just reads, "Liberal Trade-In." And the smaller text says, "Bring in your wife and just a few dollars, and we will give you a new woman."
Which, I mean, the text alone makes you do a double take.
It does, but the magic is absolutely the picture.
It's so revolutionary for the time.
It features this bouncy young man striding off the page, carrying his wife under his arm like a stiff gift box.
Because she is literally a cardboard cutout.
Exactly. It was shocking and it was funny, but most importantly, it treated the reader like an intelligent friend who could actually take a joke and understand a visual metaphor.
And treating the audience with intelligence ties directly into Bernbach's whole philosophy of subtraction.
Subtraction, meaning taking things away.
Yeah, because when you put the art director and the copywriter in the same room, you quickly realize you just don't need to explain everything with text.
Right. Let the picture do the talking.
Exactly. Bernbach's overarching demand to his creatives was basically get to the point. If the reader had to stop and think about what the ad meant, he considered it a failure.
So he demanded massive visuals.
Massive visuals, zero clutter on the page, and incredibly short copy.
There's that famous story where he used to walk through the agency's open plan office space.
Bullpen, yeah.
Right, the bullpen. And he would just look over people's shoulders and cross out entire first paragraphs of text.
He was ruthless.
He'd look at a draft and ask why they felt the need to go through all that throat clearing just to get to the point. He would literally point halfway down the page and say, "There's your point right there. Start there."
Well, he was so ruthless about editing because he understood this really vital psychological truth about print media.
Which is?
The feel of the page rubs off on the product itself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, think about it. If the layout is elegant, clean, and witty, the consumer unconsciously assumes the product is elegant, clean, and witty.
But if the ad looks like schlock.
Right. If it's cluttered with exclamation points and tiny, desperate text trying to convince you of its value, you assume the product is schlock.
That makes so much sense. And that philosophy of subtraction directly enabled the campaigns that followed. Because DDB wasn't just selling products with these clean pages.
No, they were actively shifting American cultural attitudes.
They really changed the zeitgeist. Starting with Volkswagen. I mean, picture the 1950s American automotive dream.
Oh, it was all about massive fins, heavy chrome, just blatant acquisitiveness.
Yeah, car ads featured these columned mansions and women in ball gowns standing next to these boat-sized vehicles.
And then DDB takes the VW Beetle, which is this odd-looking, tiny foreign car, and they place it in a totally blank, unpretentious white limbo on the page.
Just floating there.
Just floating. And beneath it, they wrote the headline, "Think Small." 2 words. But that specific campaign didn't just sell a vehicle. It honestly challenged an entire generation's ideas about materialism.
By subverting the expected standard of luxury, they gave people psychological permission to kind of step off the treadmill of keeping up with the Joneses.
Exactly. And they pulled a really similar cultural lever with Avis Rent-A-Car.
Oh, the #2 campaign.
Yeah, because American culture is obsessed with being number one, right? With being the ultimate winner. But DDB writes, "We try harder. We're only number 2.
They took a perceived weakness and totally transformed it into a moral virtue.
They actually made it appealing to not be the biggest guy in the room.
And then we see them tackling actual social fabric with Levy's rye bread.
Those subway posters were gorgeous.
They really were. They featured a diverse array of New Yorkers, a Native American man, an Asian man, an Irish couple eating a sandwich with the headline, "You don't have to be Jewish to love Levy's real Jewish rye."
And observers at the time noted that that single campaign helped people feel comfortable with America's ethnic diversity in a way that countless human relations commissions just couldn't achieve.
They normalized the melting pot while selling bread.
Because the subtraction on the page allowed the actual humanity of the subjects to take center stage.
So the cultural impact is profound, but we definitely have to look at the political impact too.
Right, the 1964 campaign.
Yes, the commercial for Lyndon B. Johnson's presidential campaign against Barry Goldwater. And just to frame this for you listening, We are examining this strictly as an objective historical artifact of advertising technique.
Right, we're not endorsing any political ideology here.
Exactly, completely neutral. But looking at it through the lens of media history.
It is arguably one of the most consequential 60 seconds of film ever produced.
The Daisy ad.
The Daisy ad. It opens with this little girl innocently standing in a field, plucking petals off a daisy and counting them.
And then, suddenly, this harsh military voice cuts in on a loudspeaker, counting down from 10.
The camera zooms in super tight on the little girl's eye, and then the screen just cuts to a horrific nuclear explosion and a massive mushroom cloud.
And the crazy thing is, it only ran as a paid spot one single time.
One time. But that single airing fundamentally changed modern politics.
How so?
Because it proved that tapping into primal fear was incredibly effective. Before that moment, political ads were mostly like positive jingles, candidate biographies, or just straightforward speeches to the camera.
Very dry.
Very dry. But the Daisy ad launched the era of negative political advertising by using the jarring juxtaposition of innocence and annihilation. It literally short-circuited the viewer's rational brain.
But fear wasn't the only emotion they learned to harness on television, right?
No, not at all. Bob Gage and Phil Robinson basically invented the emotional television commercial with their work for Polaroid.
Because before DDB, TV commercials were shot like little Hollywood movies, complete with glamorous, artificial lighting and very stiff theatrical sets.
Gage hated that artificiality. He actually brought in real New York still photographers to shoot their TV commercials because he wanted an authentic documentary feel.
There's that great story from Robinson about Gage being obsessed with West Side Story.
Yes, specifically the song Maria. Gage clocked the runtime of the song and realized it took Leonard Bernstein 3 minutes to make an audience cry.
And Gage basically said, "Hold my beer."
Exactly. He turned to Robinson and said that if Bernstein could do it in 3 minutes, they could do it in 1 minute.
And they totally succeeded. They showed a mother and father looking incredibly shaken and proud, leaving their little boy at sleepaway camp for the first time.
Or the spot with a father and his sleepy little girl in a horse carriage in Central Park. It was just pure, unfiltered humanity on the screen.
But okay, this is where I really have to push back on the legacy here.
Okay, let's hear it.
I look at the Daisy ad and I look at the Polaroid ads, and honestly, it feels deeply manipulative. Doesn't it take an unbelievable amount of arrogance to sit in a Madison Avenue office and assume you know exactly how to pull the public's heartstrings like some kind of puppet master? They are basically weaponizing human emotion to sell cameras.
I definitely won't deny the moral ambiguity of it. It absolutely is a form of manipulation.
Right.
But if we look at Bernbach's core philosophy, it wasn't born of arrogance. It was actually born of a profound, almost biological understanding of human nature.
Biological?
Yeah. Bernbach firmly believed that true persuasion requires touching unchanging human instincts.
Okay, go on.
He taught his staff that to persuade a consumer, you have to touch their obsessive drive to survive.
Which we clearly see weaponized in the Daisy ad.
Exactly. Or you have to touch their drive to be admired, which we see in the Think Small VW ads subverting status.
And the drive to love and take care of their own.
Which is the engine of the Polaroid campaigns. He knew that human language and rationalization are often just camouflage for what actually motivates us.
So it's bypassing logic and rational defense mechanisms to speak to the literal core of what makes us human. He went straight for the instinct.
Straight for it, every time.
Which brings us to the ultimate paradox here, because this man who understood human nature so deeply, who built a massive empire on the philosophy of do it different and taking creative risks,
Lived a personal life that was the exact opposite.
the contradiction of Bill Bernbach is fascinating. The man who demanded his creatives break every rule in the book was, in his personal life, almost obsessively rigid.
We are talking about a man who took the exact same road to work every single day.
He ate lunch at the exact same restaurants, right?
For years, it was the Rose Room at the Algonquin, and later the Four Seasons, or 21.
And the clothes. He wore the exact same style of clothes every day. Soft gray suits, custom blue shirts from Turnbull & Asser, and what the New York Times called the corporate cravat.
Right. Those navy silk ties with tiny conservative dots. Style writers often know that dots are the most conservative pattern of all. They're favored defensively by people whose honor must be thought beyond question.
Wow. And his need for environmental control was absolute. Like when DDB moved their offices to a brand new building, Bernbach refused to change his workspace.
Didn't he rip up the floor?
He literally had the floor of his old office ripped up and reinstalled in the new building so that his physical environment would remain unchanged.
That is extreme.
So to understand why a creative genius required that level of extreme control, we really have to look at his origins in the Bronx.
His parents.
Yeah. His father, Jacob, was a clothing designer. Very proud man who kept a patriarchal portrait of himself hanging in the living room. But his mother, Rebecca, was the true dominating force.
She was a deeply controlling figure.
Deeply. She used intense emotional manipulation to maintain order. She would constantly threaten the family with bodeful reflections on her health.
Fake illnesses.
Yeah. She would fake illnesses and tell the family she would surely die if anyone acted against her will.
Oh, that's heavy.
And she clung tenaciously to the traditions of the old world, creating this highly volatile home environment.
Which kind of sets the stage for the ultimate personal risk of Bernbach's life.
The mailroom romance.
Right. During the Depression, he gets a job in the mailroom at Shenley Distillers, and he meets Evelyn Carbone.
An Italian Catholic.
Exactly. He falls completely in love with her and decides to bring her home to the Bronx. And his mother, Rebecca, unleashes absolute chaos.
Did she actually throw herself on the floor?
She threw herself on the floor screaming.
Yeah.
She told Bill that marrying a woman outside their faith would literally kill her. Sunday after Sunday, she threw these horrific, dramatic furies to break his resolve.
But Bill marries Evelyn anyway in 1938.
He does. And the fallout is biblical.
I mean, Rebecca doesn't die, obviously.
No, but she forces her husband, Jacob, to act. Following strict Orthodox tradition, Bernbach's father officially declared his son dead.
I can't even imagine that kind of familial trauma.
And adding to that psychological burden, he also carried a deeply embarrassing military record.
Right. He was drafted, but at his induction physical, his resting heart rate was racing at 148 beats per minute.
They shipped him to boot camp anyway, but discharged him after just 2 months because medical officers were certain he wouldn't survive the training.
So looking at those two events, being declared dead by your own father and failing out of the military due to a panic-induced heart rate, it actually makes complete sense why he needed his daily routine to be boring.
It was a survival mechanism.
He likely needed the gray suits and the exact same lunch schedule, so his brain had the safety and the bandwidth to be wild at work. His routine was a fortress.
That's a great way to put it. The rigidity was his anchor, not hypocrisy. He learned early on that uncontrollable emotions led to trauma and rejection.
So he meticulously curated his image.
Absolutely. He refused to talk to the press about his personal past. He actively covered up the short military stint. He basically created a flawless, unshakable public facade of the brilliant, untouchable ad man.
Specifically to protect that deeply sensitive, rejected boy from the Bronx.
Exactly.
So then the question becomes, how does a highly controlled, deeply sensitive man manage an agency that was just overflowing with chaotic, artistic egos?
Because by the 1960s, DDB is the absolute center of the advertising universe.
Employing some of the most eccentric creative minds in the world.
Well, the agency was commonly referred to as the University of Bernbach. And the atmosphere was this really potent mixture of love and fear.
The creatives absolutely worshipped his vision, but they were terrified of his disapproval.
He definitely established himself as the ultimate, albeit demanding, father figure. He told his managers that they had to learn to be arrogant to defend their creative work.
Yet at the same time, he kept a little slip of paper in his shirt pocket.
Just reading, maybe he's right.
That is so telling. It was a constant, private reminder to himself to listen and to temper his own absolute authority.
And he used that authority brilliantly to motivate his staff,
Right.
creating a very specific feedback loop.
Oh, his motivation tactic when dealing with difficult clients is a masterclass in management.
Walk us through it.
Okay, so let's say a creative team brings a campaign to a client and the client hates it and demands changes.
In other agencies, the boss would scream at the creatives and tell them to do whatever the client wants.
Right. But Bernbach would bring the creatives into his office, look at the rejected ad, and say, this is terrific, the client is completely wrong.
Which is immediate validation, makes the creatives feel safe and protected by leadership.
Exactly. But then he would follow it up with the hook. He would say, but I bet you can come up with an even better idea.
Oh, that's good.
And the creatives would literally float back to their desks, completely energized and desperate to prove him right by topping their own previously rejected work.
It's genius. But that father-figure dynamic definitely cultivated a dark side.
Because he became too famous.
Because Bernbach was the ultimate editor and the public face of the agency, so the industry started calling the work Mr. Bernbach's ads.
Ah.
And the creatives, brilliant people like Helmut Krome, developed this intense love-hate relationship with him. They loved him for nurturing their talent, but they deeply resented that their original work was constantly being absorbed into his personal legend.
That centralization of credit and control makes the end of his life incredibly tragic, doesn't it?
It really does. Bernbach developed leukemia, and true to his need for absolute privacy, he battled it in secret for 5 years.
He told no one at the agency.
He didn't even tell his own sons. He came to the office, physically wasting away, keeping his private self completely sealed off until the very end. He died in 1982.
And because he had never picked a successor, maybe because he couldn't imagine the agency existing without him, it immediately fell into chaos.
Within 4 years, without their father to approve the work and maintain the culture, Doyle Dane Bernbach collapsed into a massive corporate mega-merger.
Doris Willens highlights a quote from the management authority Peter Drucker in the book that perfectly encapsulates this.
Right. Drucker stated that the gravest indictment of a leader is for the organization to collapse as soon as he leaves or dies.
Bernbach's brilliant control created the golden age of advertising, but his absolute inability to relinquish that control or to show any human vulnerability to his team was ultimately his Achilles heel.
Yeah, we've traced this incredible journey today from the loud, insulting hucksterism of the 1950s to the emotional, art-driven persuasion of modern advertising.
And the entire paradigm was shifted by a man who understood everyone else's instincts perfectly, but spent his life meticulously hiding his own.
Which leaves us with a really profound concept to consider regarding authenticity.
Let's hear it.
Well, Bernbach famously believed that great advertising couldn't save a bad product. He argued that a great ad would only make people realize a product was bad faster because more people would try it, experience the poor quality, and be disappointed.
So, applying that advertising truth to human beings reveals a lot. Especially today, when you consider this era we live in, obsessed with personal branding and social media curation.
Exactly. What happens when we spend all of our energy perfectly art-directing our public image, but we neglect the reality underneath?
If you are essentially a bad product hiding behind a brilliant, carefully controlled ad campaign, eventually the consumer, or in our case, the people we love and work with, will find out the truth when they get close enough.
It brings us right back to that late-night infomercial.
You can yell amazing as loud as you want, and you might secure the initial sale or make a great first impression. But if the substance isn't there when the box is finally opened, the illusion shatters completely. It's something to think about the next time you find yourself carefully curating your own image. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.